Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'm going to be doing a first impressions of the Reebok Nano 12 Froning. I'm also going to compare this model's construction to the construction of the original Reebok Nano 12. I'll also talk about some sizing and fit thoughts between the two shoes. So if you are looking into the Nano 12 or the Nano 12 Froning, hopefully that can help you out. I have timestamped that section down below. But that being said, let's dive into a first few thoughts that I have with the Nano 12 Froning. So this model is really interesting. Honestly, I am very hit or miss on it based on what I'm doing in the shoe. Thus far, I've trained a few times in this model. I have worn them for pickleball, and I like them for certain training contexts, don't like them for others. Honestly, they remind me a lot of how the Reebok Nano 11 Froning was, where it was kind of polarizing in nature. It worked really well for certain things, but then there were also construction details that just kind of made me question, like, why was that a thing? And so with the Nano 12 Froning, the whole shtick of the shoe is that it's the lightest weight Nano 12 iteration to date. So for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 10.4 ounces. My Reebok Nano 12 in a size 10 weighs 11.9 ounces. So my first impression with this shoe is that if you like really lightweight shoes, that might be a big deal for you. However, if you're not necessarily wanting the Froning iteration of the Nano 12, or if you're just like a recreational lifter and don't really care about 1.5 ounces regarding weight difference between this model and the original Nano 12, honestly, I don't think that's going to be the biggest deal. So while I do like lighter weight shoes naturally for training, honestly, that 1.5 ounces doesn't really make or break your performance. And I don't think most athletes and lifters will really notice a huge difference there in that context. My second first impression with this model is that I like the upper construction, but I also see there being potential issues with it. So this model's upper construction is entirely reworked. We now have an open mesh upper. And so I like it because it breathes really well. Even if you're wearing thicker socks, your feet are gonna stay pretty cool in the shoe, and it just has a nice level of maneuverability to it. So it actually reminds me of the upper in the Reebok Speed TR. That was one of my favorite shoes to date from Reebok. Rest in peace, because they have been discontinued. So if you also like that model, I do think you would like the upper in the shoe. My issue with the upper in the shoe though, is that since it is so lightweight, I'm curious how the long-term durability is going to fare in this model for multiple lifters and athletes training in different contexts. And so with this shoe, I wore them for pickleball for literally an hour yesterday. And I remember one specific dig where I did drag my toe a little bit, and I already ripped the mesh upper in this toe box. So this model is not necessarily made for pickleball, I know that. However, if you're training outdoors in this shoe and you're doing any form of burpee or get up style movement, I would say be very conscious of the upper construction durability in this model, because I don't think it's going to necessarily have the tenacity to really withstand a lot of abrasion. So that is something to think about with the shoe. And I know I actually do get some comments about using training shoes for pickleball. And so if you are somebody who regularly asks that on some of my videos, don't use the Nano 12 Froning for pickleball for 150 USD. It ain't worth it. The third first impression that I have with the shoe is that the boot construction is really interesting, and I'm not sure it's going to resonate with every lifter and athlete. So with this boot construction, it is very lightweight. There's not a ton of structure to it. And so my issue with this is that since it is so lightweight, if you wear this model a little bit looser, you start to get a little bit of space here around the malleolus on the lateral and medial side. So you'll have a little bit of space here. And so when you tighten this, what ends up happening is you end up getting this bubble down here. So I had this shoe tightened when I was using them to train in the other day, and I left them the way they were because I wanted to highlight this, but this is a bubble that forms down at the bottom when you tighten this model if you want to prevent that space in the heel. And so I didn't necessarily have heel slip issues in this shoe yet, but because the heel doesn't have a ton of structure, I could see that being an issue for folks who do want to wear these a little bit looser. So this would not be my favorite model for daily wear if you just want to wear them a little bit more casually and wear them looser, because this heel construction I actually could see being problematic for a little bit of slip or just lacking overall security, especially if you do like having a slightly more rigid boot or cup for your heel. My fourth first impression with this shoe is that if you like the Nano 12's midsole and outsole construction, so if you like this full rubber outsole with the lug patterning, if you like that Float Ride Energy Foam midsole, you are going to like how the Nano 12 Froning feels and fits. It is very similar. These two construction components are virtually the same as the Nano 12, so you do get a similar level of stability and versatility with this model. And when it comes to being responsive yet stable, I do like that about the Nano 12 iterations and that line. So that is something that I think is a big pro of this model, especially if you are somebody who really loves Rich Froning and you like to buy the Froning iterations. So just as a quick follow-up to my fourth first impression, and yes, I am adding this in after I've already filmed my first clips, because this happened after I went and trained in this model. After I filmed this morning, downfalls of filming and editing all my own content, and yes, if the transition is a little bit bumpy on this little edit, I do apologize. My editing skills are of what a dinosaur's probably are. But basically, was doing some rope climbs in this model, and just like in the Nano 12, if you do J-Wrap rope climbing, you're probably gonna break this shoe right away. This was on my second climb when this lipping already started to happen, so as you can see, you're already having that sole pull away from that TPU clip, and that is the same exact issue that the Nano 12 had. So again, like, this model works decently well for cross training and CrossFit if you don't plan on rope climbing, and I know rope climbing isn't a huge part of that training vertical, but if you do plan on buying this for CrossFit, I would say do not rope climb in them, because for 150 to have this shoe break this fast, that's a big gripe I have with the Nano 12 and the other iterations. It's just not my favorite feature with the shoe. But now back to the video. I just wanted to add this point in because I do think it's really important to highlight for folks who are looking into the shoe. Now with the shoe, this model does have an increased price point of 150 USD. So honestly, I feel like if you're a lifter or athlete that doesn't necessarily care that it's the Froning iteration and you don't really collect cross-training shoes when it is a special spin-off editions like this shoe, I would say probably go with the Nano 12 or the Nano 12 Adventure or a different iteration, because the shoe is interesting and it performs well in certain contexts, but there are also construction details that I just don't think are going to resonate with everyone. Now, before I draw out my definitive pros and cons and performance thoughts on the shoe, I do want more sessions in them because I feel like this is going to be a very polarizing model. I feel like some folks are going to really resonate and love it, and then others are going to be like, whoa, I'm not a big fan of the boot construction, the midfoot construction, and the long-term durability. But let's go ahead and compare this model to the Nano 12 now. All right, so now let's cover some major construction differences between the Nano 12 Froning and the Nano 12. So the first major difference is the upper constructions. So in the Nano 12, you have the knit upper through the forefoot, you have some synthetic overlays to the midfoot, and then you have some mesh layers back here in the heel. The heel is a bit more structured than the Nano 12 Froning. In the Nano 12 Froning, you have an open mesh upper that runs the entirety of the shoe. It basically extends from the forefoot to the heel. We do have a synthetic overlay here. We don't have a beefy toe guard, so that is something that, again, I think could be an issue when it comes to overall stability for multi-directional work, but also long-term durability. And then back here in the heel, you don't have a ton of support either. So there is virtually no cup or boot in the heel of the shoe, which, again, mentioned in my first impressions, could be hit or miss for certain athletes and lifters. The tongue in the Nano 12 Froning is also this breathable mesh, so be very careful when you're pulling this tongue on. We have seen issues with thin mesh tongues like this ripping before, so I would highly suggest using two hands and pulling this tongue up if you are tightening them and adjusting the tongue. You do have a midfoot tongue loop here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eyelets that wrap up. In the Nano 12, you do have 5 eyelets as well. You have a slightly thicker tongue, and you also have a tongue loop that sits a little bit higher on the tongue. Both tongues I feel like are pretty secure. I haven't had any major issues yet with the Nano 12 Froning's tongue like rounding in, so that is something that I think is a pro with this model. I'm glad that they put the loop a little bit lower on the tongue with this shoe. And then looking at the midsole and outsole construction in the Nano 12 Froning, we have a flow ride energy foam throughout the entirety of the shoe's midsole. We have a full rubber outsole and a lug tread patterning. This is virtually the same as the Nano 12, so if you do like these two construction components of the Nano 12, you will like that in the Nano 12 Froning. Just like most Froning iterations, those core components generally stay the same. Looking at the heel clip on the Nano 12 Froning, it is also very similar to the Nano 12. So we have this wrap that goes from the midfoot and extends back here into the heel. That is similar on the medial side. And then we also have that plastic TPU layer back here for handstand push-ups. That is once again very similar to the Nano 12s. So if you do like that again about this model, you will like that about the Nano 12 Froning. And then when it comes to the sizing and fit of these two shoes, honestly, I wear size 10 in both of them. I actually find the Nano 12 Froning to be a little bit smaller when it comes to its length and overall width. I think that likely has to do with the upper construction and how it interacts with the sole of the shoe. But if you are looking into the Nano 12 Froning, if you have a narrow foot and even a neutral width foot, you might want to go down a half size similar to the Nano 12. And if you have a wider foot, you should be safe going true to size. So I would say size them the same as the Nano 12, despite them having a slightly different fit regarding their overall width and length. But when it comes to how you should size them, I would say stay consistent with the Nano 12 just to play it safe. But that wraps up this first impressions of the Nano 12 Froning. If you have additional questions on this model, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. I plan to have a full review up on this model very soon, so definitely stick around for that. But as always, guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.